Sometime in the next few minutes, you're going to check the time. You won't decide to. Your eyes will just drift to a corner of a screen or a wrist or a wall, and a number will be waiting there. And in that half second, without thinking about it, you'll know exactly where you are in the day. Whether you're early, whether you're late, whether you're allowed to rest yet, that number runs your life. You wake to it, eat to it, sleep against it. It's so woven into you that it feels like part of the natural world. Like gravity, like weather, but it isn't. For almost the entire history of our species, no human being on Earth knew what time it was, not approximately. Not at all, there was no number, and they were fine. They lived full lives, raised children, built the first cities, and not one of them ever once felt late. So how did they do it? How did people tell time before there was such thing as time? Start with the obvious answer: the sun. For hundreds of thousands of years, the sun was the only clock anyone had, and it was enough. When it rose, the day began. When it climbed to its highest point, that was the middle. When it sank, you found shelter and fire before the dark arrived. But it went deeper than just up and down. Ancient humans read the sun the way you read a familiar face. The length of a shadow told them how far the day had traveled. A short shadow at your feet meant midday. A long one stretching east meant the light was almost gone. People didn't check the time. They glanced at the ground. Eventually, we made that reading permanent. The Egyptians raised tall stones and watched the shadow sweep across the sand like a hand across a dial. By around 1500 BCE, they had shadow clocks, simple notched sticks that split the daylight into parts. The Greeks, the Chinese, and the Babylonians all landed on versions of the same idea on their own because the skies was the one clock everyone could see. But notice what kind of time this is. It isn't a number you're behind on, it's a position. Time was a place the sun was standing in, and you weren't racing it. You were just somewhere underneath it. The trouble is the sun only tells you about a single day. It can't tell you when to plant, when the rains are coming, when the cold will arrive and try to kill you. For that, ancient humans needed a bigger clock, and they found one hanging over their heads every night. The moon gave them the first long unit of time. 13 cycles of it, roughly, filled the gap between one summer and the next, which is why so many old calendars count in moons, and why the word month still has the moon buried inside it. The stars gave them something even more precise. In Egypt, everything depended on the Nile flooding at the right time. Too early or too late, and people starved. So they watched for one particular star, Sirius, the brightest in the sky. For weeks, it would be invisible, lost in the sun's glare. Then, on one specific morning each year, it would rise just before dawn, and within days the Nile would begin to flood. An entire civilization set its calendar by the reappearance of a single star. And some people went further than watching. They built. Across the ancient world, there are enormous stone structures that turn out to be machines for catching time. At Newgrange in Ireland, a tomb 5,000 years old, older than the pyramids, there's a narrow slot above the entrance. For all but a few days of the year, it does nothing. But on the morning of the winter solstice, the shortest day, the rising sun lines up perfectly and sends a single beam of light crawling down a long stone passage until it floods the chamber at the very back. For 17 minutes, once a year. Someone, 50 centuries ago, understood the year well enough to build that, to wait for it. To stand in that chamber in the dark and watch the light arrive on schedule. That's not telling time. That's keeping it. But here's where this stops being a story about the sky and starts being a story about you. Because there was one more clock ancient humans used, the oldest one of all, and it wasn't in the sky at all. It was inside their bodies. It's inside yours right now. In 1962, a young French scientist named Michel Siffre climbed down into a cave deep beneath the Alps and stayed there for 2 months. Completely alone. No sunlight, no watch. No way of knowing whether it was day or night above him. He wanted to find out what would happen to a person cut off from time entirely. What happened was strange. His body kept a rhythm anyway. He slept and woke and ate and worked in a cycle that stayed close to a single day, even with no sun to set it by. But his sense of time came loose from the real world. When his team finally told him the experiment was over, Siffre was stunned. He was convinced it was a month earlier than it actually was. His mind had lost the days completely. But his body, down there in the dark, had quietly gone on keeping them. That rhythm has a name now. Your circadian clock. It lives in a cluster of cells in your brain barely bigger than a grain of rice, and it runs a roughly 24-hour cycle whether you tell it to or not. It decides when you get tired, when your body temperature drops, when you'll feel most awake. It's still ticking inside you in a windowless room on a long flight in the worst night of insomnia of your life. Ancient humans didn't just read time off the world around them, they felt it from the inside. Hunger, drowsiness, the pull of dawn. That was their clock, and it was accurate enough to live an entire life by. You still have it. You've just spent your whole life overriding it. So if people had the sun, the stars, and a clock built into their own bodies, clocks that worked for 300,000 years, what changed? Why are you so afraid of being late? The answer is that slowly we took time away from the sky and started cutting it into pieces. The first cuts were uneven, in a way that's hard to believe now. When the Egyptians split daylight into 12 parts, those parts weren't a fixed length. They were just 1/12 of however long the sun happened to be up, which means an hour in summer was long and an hour in winter was short. The hour stretched and shrank with the seasons, and for thousands of years that was completely normal. The idea that an hour should always be the same length would have sounded bizarre. What changed that was prayer. In medieval Europe, monasteries needed everyone praying at the same moments through the day and night, so they began ringing bells to mark them. Time became a sound, a bell that told you to stop whatever you were doing and begin something else. We still carry the fingerprint of that everywhere. The word clock comes from the old word for bell. And then somewhere around 700 years ago, someone built a machine that could ring those bells without the sun, without a star, without a body. The mechanical clock. It didn't measure anything in nature. It just counted evenly forever, indifferent to whether it was light or dark. And for the first time, the hour stopped breathing with the seasons and became a rigid, identical block. The clock climbed down from the church tower and into the town square. Then into the factory, where the whistle replaced the rooster, the number on the wall replaced the shadow on the ground, and eventually it climbed into your pocket and onto your wrist and into the corner of every screen you own. And this is what we traded. For almost all of human history, time was something you noticed. It was the sun on the ground, the moon thinning to a sliver, the star that meant the floods were coming, the tiredness rising in your own chest at the end of the day. Time was a thing the world did, and you lived inside it. Now it's a thing that's done to you, a number you're measured against. You can be behind on a morning. You can lose an hour. You can lie in bed at 2 in the morning, wide awake, and call it a disorder, when your sleepless ancestors would have simply called it the night and used those quiet hours to think. That low, constant pressure you feel, the sense that the day is slipping away, that you're not moving fast enough, that there's never enough time, none of it is ancient. It isn't human nature. It's the sound of a body that still keeps time the old way, living inside a world that runs on a machine. So the next time your eyes drift, without asking, to that little number in the corner of the screen, pause for 1 second before it tells you whether to panic. Because for 300,000 years, your ancestors stood under the same sun you're under now and never once knew what time it was. They watched a shadow cross the ground, they waited for a single star, they felt the day end in their own bones. And somehow, with none of the things you're so afraid of being late for, they built everything you came from. The clock isn't time, it never was. It's just the thing we invented to stop ourselves from looking up.